Good afternoon, Unit 6. Actually, it's morning where I'm at, but I'll go with where you're at. Students take precedent here. And we're looking forward to a great conversation this afternoon. And my name is Tom Vance. I'm a professor of education at Kansas State University, and been doing We the People related stuff for 30 years.
Hey everybody, I'm Sean Arthurs. I'm just living just south of Washington D.C. in Alexandria, Virginia, and I'm hoping that we're going to get the afternoon off to just as great a start as Paige Buckers did for your hometown Huskies.
My name is Luana Davis. I am a law professor at Cumberland School of Law in Birmingham, Alabama, and welcome to the finals.
And would you please introduce yourselves to us?
Good afternoon, judges. We are Unit 6. Our unit focuses on the challenges that face our democracy in the 21st century. My name is Amanda, and I'll be studying psychology this fall at the University of Connecticut.
Hello, my name is Jack, and I will also be attending the University of Connecticut this fall, and I will be majoring in computer science.
Hi, my name is Callan, and I'll be studying dental hygiene at the University of New Haven. But for now, we're all seniors at Trumbull High School. This is our teacher, Miss Bolin, and we thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Your question is, question 2, President Dwight D. Eisenhower said, "We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. Do you agree or disagree? Why? What disagreements did the founders have about a standing army, and are they relevant today? To what extent should there be an international U.S. military presence?" You may begin.
President Franklin Roosevelt said, "Great power involves great responsibility." The United States' transformation from a small industrializing nation to a global superpower brought with it great responsibility. Our international presence now spans almost every corner of the globe. The Americans have been involved in military conflicts in nearly every continent, and dozens of countries rely on billions of American aid for their own political and economic stability.
In his 1961 farewell address, President Eisenhower issued a solemn warning about the skyrocketing spending of the U.S. defense industry, which had increased greatly after World War II. Coining the phrase military-industrial complex, he described the growing relationship between defense contractors like Boeing, seeking lucrative opportunities from the U.S. government, and the vibrant war chest at the disposal of the Pentagon.
Eisenhower believed these relationships would have grave implications as they were incentivized by the existence of conflict, not peace. He said that every gun that is made, every warship launched, is, in the final sense, a theft from those who hunger and are not fed. We agree. In our view, Eisenhower's concerns still exist because of a lack of transparency in the political process today.
The founders' deep skepticism towards standing armies manifested itself in the Constitution, which granted Congress the power to provide and maintain a navy, but stipulated that armies would be raised and supported as needed, essentially implying that there would be no standing army.
Few ideas were more widely accepted in early America than that of the danger of peacetime standing armies. This anti-standing army sentiment motivated colonial opposition to post-French and Indian War British policies and intensified after the Boston Massacre.
To the Federalist, the ability of Congress to raise and support armies was necessary for defending the country from foreign enemies and maintaining security within its borders. To the Anti-Federalists, this was an enlargement of the national government's independence from state legislatures and left the door open for future abuses of a potential standing army.
For much of our nation's history, Americans were successful at staying out of unnecessary wars and therefore had little need for a large military. When Congress saw fit to declare war, as from the few occasions from the War of 1812 to World War II, they did so while raising provisions for the necessary numbers of men and materials.
Attitudes towards a standing military began to change in the years after World War II. By the 1960s, there existed a permanent state of near war against communist regimes in the Soviet Union and China, and bloody proxy wars waged in Southeast Asia, along with murky covert operations from Iran to Guatemala. Most importantly, the United States conscripted millions into an enormous standing army.
Today, nearly a quarter of every tax dollar collected by the American government goes directly to the military, surpassing the next best funded agency by a vast margin. Much of that money goes to a select few private corporations who enjoy cozy relationships with the government.
The Biden administration launched a review of our military's global presence to ensure that it is correctly sized and supports strategy. The United States needs to take a hard look at these bases and make cuts where appropriate. Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut argued that some bases, especially those in the Gulf states, are not worth the risks that they create.
COVID-19 has severely affected the world's health and economy. To combat this in Italy, the Department of Defense gifted a $10 million package in partnership with the U.S. European Command and our embassy in Rome. We believe that this should be the role of the U.S. military overseas.
History will no doubt look back on the last 60 years since Eisenhower delivered his farewell address as one dominated by unnecessary executive police actions. We applaud President Biden's decision to bring home the troops in Afghanistan this year. Eisenhower's warning still rings true today and needs to be addressed.
Thank you. We are now ready for your questions.
Hey, everybody. So thank you. About 15 miles from where I live is the White House, and just north of that is Lafayette Square. Last summer, there were protests all over the country, including a protest at Lafayette Square, where the protesters were cleared out. And immediately after the protesters were cleared out, the president appeared in the square with the head military officer in the United States, the General Milley, who's in charge of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Should General Milley have allowed himself to be in that photo last year? Any risks?
I believe that with all social media comes the risk of support and trends. So when you see that General Milley stepped into this photo, it sounds like he either was supporting this group of this societal group that you're talking about. And I think that if he is promoting something such as that, it could look bad for his reputation.
I believe that with the U.S. military's over-involvement in our current police forces, especially with the over-militaristic force against protesters, especially the Black Lives Matter protesters, which we've seen all over the country, I believe that the $732 billion spent in the military should not be spent on police and involvement with police.
I would argue that being a general of the U.S. military might be different if you're, for example, the chief of police or something, but I don't think that the general of the U.S. military has a lot to fear from posting certain photos or things of that nature, because when it comes to being a general of the U.S. military, he has to do his job. He knows what his job is. And as long as he does that job and he does it to the best of his ability, I do not believe that posting a photo on social media will threaten or adhere his ability to do so.
Okay. So this photo did have consequences, but let's talk about when can a military officer, when can a general say to the commander-in-chief, no, I will not do what you're asking? Is there any time? Is there any time a military officer, and you can use the general and the president in this case, or is there any time when a military officer should say, no, I will not or cannot do what you were asking me to do?
Well, I think that a good example of that is when you look at the commander-in-chief's ability to launch a nuclear attack on a foreign nation. For this example, there are steps that need to be taken in order for the president to do so. And he cannot simply just press that button and launch a nuclear attack on some country. It goes to the Secretary of Defense and it goes to a general of the U.S. military. And if that is an example where he could disagree with the president. He could say that your reasons for launching this nuclear attack are not justified, and therefore I will not allow you to launch this attack. So there are certainly scenarios where someone in the military could deny the commander-in-chief an order.
I agree with Jack, and also not only someone below the commander-in-chief, but also Congress has the power to deny those high in power in the military. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 says that Congress has the power to defund the military and has to be asked specifically for what military expenses are used. So Congress does have the power to limit this.
Going off of what Amanda said, Congress also has the power through the War Powers Resolution, yet it's not always effective, as we've seen with almost every single president who has violated it so far. More recently, President Obama in 2011, when 10 House Senate members tried to disembark the troops that he sent into Libya, and yet it was denied because the War Powers Resolution really does not serve its purpose. So that check on the president in that case does not necessarily serve its purpose.
Part of President Eisenhower's speech was saying to the American people, part of what will protect us against the military industrial complex is a knowledgeable and alert citizenry. How can we create that knowledge and alertness among the citizens if much of what the military does is by nature secret or, sort of protected from disclosure?
I think that looking at the US government, good leadership is a very important thing when it comes to this transparency in the political process, which we brought up in our speech. I think that when looking at the military, the president should foreclose as much as he can from the US citizens in order to ensure that we are correctly informed about not only what our US government is doing in terms of military, but where we intend to go and what we intend to do. Because I think that the US citizens being informed on this topic is very important so that we could correctly understand everything that the US military is doing in order to ensure that we can do our best to do so.
We also see that like right here in Connecticut, there's Sikorsky and Lockheed and Pratt & Whitney, where in Connecticut alone, it accounts for 26,000 jobs. And if we disagree with Eisenhower's view of the military industrial complex, we are basically taking away these 26,000 jobs and defunding these programs that eliminate which would eliminate military production. So I believe that keeping them in the loop and keeping them informed and keeping these jobs that fulfill household incomes is really important.
Are there aside from an informed citizenry, are there any other checks that you can think of on the rising power of the military industrial complex?
James Madison said that no nation could preserve its own freedom under continuous warfare. So I do think Congress should more strictly use the power of the purse, because I do believe that we are expanding way too rapidly with our military and are spending, again, $732 billion in 2019, when there are things like poverty currently happening domestically, where 11.9 children are currently living in poverty. So I do believe Congress should more strictly use the power of the purse to restrict this.
So that's one way. Others?
Well, I believe that when looking especially at the Middle East, President Biden recently declared that he plans on withdrawing the troops from Afghanistan. And I think this is a really important step in, kind of containing the rise of the military industrial complex. And oil is a big thing in the Middle East, and that's a reason why, or an excuse that the politicians have been using to maintain such a large military presence in the Middle East. But if you look in 1980, it certainly was a very important thing in the Middle East because the US got 29% of its oil imports from there. And frankly, 2 decades later, not much had changed. In the year 2001, the US still received 29% of its oil imports from the Persian Gulf. But it's not 1980 anymore, and it's not 2001 anymore. Today, the US gets as much oil from home as it does from abroad. And from that portion abroad, only 13% comes from the Persian Gulf. So I agree with President Biden. I think it's time we stop using oil as an excuse to maintain such a large military presence in the Middle East.
So reducing how much war we make, reducing funding, any other ways to curb the growth of the military industrial complex?
Well, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 of the Constitution does give Congress the power to declare war. And while it technically states that the military cannot wage war on their own, the president sometimes has superiority over this, which we see in the War Powers Act.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Unit 6. Welcome to day 2 of the national finals. The questions we challenged you with some heavy questions, right? I mean, these were difficult questions, and you performed very well. I mean, it's one thing to kind of know a bunch of stuff, which you obviously do, but it's another thing to be able to apply it, and yet it's something else again to be able to apply it quickly and kind of on your feet, and that's what this competition requires you to do, and you did a good job. I mean, there are and I sort of pushed you on that last question, and all of those were reasonable responses, by the way. They were very, very reasonable. And I almost think too, an argument could be made, not that this is any, I'm not downgrading you at all for not thinking about this, but in terms of campaign finance, and the cozy relationship between defense contractors and our democracy and our elections and so forth. So just something to think about. But I would think Eisenhower would think that you're knowledgeable enough to be able to check the power of the military industrial complex. And Ms. Boland, excellent job again this year preparing your students.
Thanks, all. I particularly just highlighting a couple of things I particularly enjoyed. I like your, you mentioned very current events, right? Talking about Biden bringing home troops from Afghanistan. That was very relevant. And one statistic that really stood out to me, I like how you talked about almost a quarter of every dollar, 25 cents out of every dollar goes to the military. That was, sometimes one statistic. I mean, sometimes I know it resonates for different people, but that one certainly resonated for me and hot for me. Wish we had a lot more time to chat, especially you were making some comments about how the War Powers Resolution Act hasn't actually worked. And I'm like, I want to dig in, but we only have so much time. I'm sure we can reconvene after hours for another 5 or 6 hours of civic ed discussion, but good luck the rest of the day, Connecticut.
Same, I echo what my colleagues have said. I particularly enjoyed your mention of cybersecurity, which is one of the areas where the Defense Department is now asserting itself as we're still useful because this is what we're doing. And in fairness, they do teach a lot of people cybersecurity, so that's fair comment, but very overall great presentation, and you clearly know your history. So good job there.
All right, thank you.